This podcast was produced using artificial intelligence and refined by human editors.
Hello, dearest Globetrotters, and welcome back to Travel with Lara and Luca. I'm the Luca half of this dynamic duo, ready to embark on a journey through the winding canals and bustling streets of Amsterdam.
And I'm Lara, delighted to be your co-pilot as we explore the city known for its artistic heritage, elaborate canal system, and a rich tapestry of history that's both dark and enlightened. There's no place quite like Amsterdam, is there, Luca?
Absolutely not, Lara. It's a city that captures the heart and the imagination. Speaking of imagination, do you remember the first time you laid eyes on those narrow houses with the gabled facades?
How could I forget? It's like stepping into a storybook, isn't it? Each house with its own character, each canal reflecting the mood of the sky. Amsterdam is poetry in urban form.
Well put. And speaking of urban poetry, this very episode will traverse the iconic sights of Amsterdam, spoiling you with tales from beneath the city's glistening surface to the very top of its highest church tower.
Oh, and let's not forget about the cuisine, Luca. Amsterdam isn't just a feast for the eyes, but a banquet for the taste buds too.
You've got that right. Delicious Dutch delights await us. But first things first, in this introduction, dear travelers, we want to set the stage, give you a taste of what's to come, and share a little bit about why this city means so much to us.
You see, Luca, Amsterdam holds a special place in my heart, not just for its museums and galleries, but for the life that pulses through its streets, the buskers, the cafe dwellers, the clatter of bicycle gears.
And let's not forget the friendly nods from locals, except when you accidentally step into a bike lane. It's an exhilarating symphony of sights and sounds that you really have to experience to believe.
It's like the city has its own language, isn't it? Time seems to take on a different pace in Amsterdam. What do you say, Luca? Shall we let our listeners in on a little secret about what they'll learn in today's episode?
We definitely should, Lara. And I think it's only fair we start with one of the most arresting sights, those canals. Over 100 kilometers of waterways weaving the city into a masterpiece of engineering and aesthetic pleasure.
That's right. Those canals aren't just pretty to look at. They're a lifeline, a framework on which the story of this city is built. But what about the flavors, Luca? We can't keep the audience salivating in suspense.
Oh, the flavors will come, Lara. Think rich, melted Gouda on a freshly baked roll, or the subtle spice of a perfectly crispy bitterballen. Our next segment will take us on a gastronomic tour where calories don't count.
And those are just the opening notes of Amsterdam's culinary symphony. But my dear co-host, let's not spoil all the fun just yet. How about we unveil just one of the hidden gems we'll be discussing later on?
A teaser of a teaser. I like it. Well, how about a place swirling with colors, a neon nirvana that's quite literally glowing with creativity?
You must mean Electric Ladyland, the first museum of its kind. Ah, but that's just peeking through the keyhole. There's so much more listeners will want to discover for themselves.
And discover they shall. But now that we've dipped our toes in the water, what say you, Lara? Shall we move on with our grand tour?
Yes, let's push off from the dock and flow with the current. We've got a lot of ground, or should I say water, to cover. Starting with our first extended look into Amsterdam's iconic sights.
Sights that make your heart skip a beat and your camera's shutter work overtime. But that is to come after this opener. We'll take you to places both sky-high and history-rich that define this city's silhouette.
And I promise you, it's not just going to be a list of places and plaques. We're going to dive into the stories behind them, why they matter, and how they continue to resonate through time.
So keep your ears open and your imagination primed, dear listeners. Whether you're a seasoned traveler to Amsterdam or enjoying your first virtual visit, we've got something to pique your curiosity.
Stay with us as we paint a picture of Amsterdam's most iconic sights in the segment just ahead. Ready to share some of those tales, Luca?
Born ready, Lara. And remember, friends, after that stroll past Amsterdam's facades, we'll be serving up our next course, morsels of how the city tempts the palate with a vibrant and comforting blend of Dutch cuisine. So, we've wandered through the charming intro of our podcast, And now, dear listeners, it's time to paint the town, or rather, the iconic sights of Amsterdam.
Absolutely. Let's kick off with the Canal Belt. I mean, is there anything more quintessentially Amsterdam than those historic waterways?
Nothing comes close. The UNESCO World Heritage Site, with its crisscrossing canals, it's like Venice decided to go Dutch.
Oh, I see what you did there. And the canal houses, standing shoulder to shoulder, each one holding centuries of stories in their bricks.
Stories of wealthy merchants and sea captains. Remember that time we tried to count the gables as we walked along the Herengracht?
I lost track after 200, or was it the third stroopwafel that did me in?
Probably the latter. But from sweet treats to bittersweet memories, the Rijksmuseum isn't just a treasure trove of art. It's an homage to the human experience.
It's hard to stand in front of Rembrandt's The Night Watch and not feel a shiver down your spine. The closest thing to time travel that I know.
And speaking of time travel, the Van Gogh Museum takes us on a journey through Vincent's tormented and vibrant life, one brushstroke at a time.
There's something so raw about his work, his wheat field with crows. I swear I can hear the wings flapping.
Hauntingly beautiful, just like our next stop, the Anne Frank house. The diary, the annex.
A young girl's dreams and fears frozen in time. Visiting there is a solemn experience, but so important.
Definitely. And while we're on the topic of history, what about the Royal Palace? Lara, you're our resident history buff. What's your take?
The Royal Palace was originally a city hall, believe it or not. It became a royal residence when Napoleon's brother, Louis Bonaparte, decided to call himself King of Holland.
Classic Bonaparte move. Now, I must admit, I have a soft spot for the Westerkerk with its towering spire.
A favorite of many, including Rembrandt, who is buried there. Somewhere.
Right, they can't exactly pinpoint where he lies.
And what about you, Luca? Which iconic site still gives you goosebumps?
Oh, it has to be standing atop the 8 AM Tower, watching the city glow like a map full of golden threads.
And then realizing how close you are to plummeting down when you're on that swing over the edge.
That's one for the adrenaline junkies, unlike the tranquil wonder of the Botanical Gardens, a lush oasis dating back to the 1600s.
Hidden in plain sight, just like our next segment's treasures. But before we digress, Luca, if you were to choose one place to sit and contemplate the beauty of Amsterdam, where would it be?
You'll laugh, but it's the bench from The Fault in Our Stars. It's cliché, but there's something about it that just feels right.
I won't laugh because mine is an actual laundromat in De Piep with the most fascinating cast of characters bustling about.
Amsterdam never ceases to amaze us, does it? From landmarks that dominate guidebooks to those that win over our hearts.
Absolutely. Each site, a postcard from the past, stamped with stories of splendor and struggle.
And there's still so much more to explore. But for now, that wraps up our iconic sites. Coming up next, we'll be diving into the irresistible world of
Dutch cuisine. Prepare your taste buds, listeners. We're about to indulge in a delectable journey through Amsterdam's flavors in segment 2. Poffertjes and herring, anyone?
And we're back, taking a delectable dive into Amsterdam's food scene. Dutch cuisine often gets overshadowed by its European neighbors, but today it's time to shine a spotlight on these mouth-watering treats.
Absolutely, Luca. And we should start where every Amsterdam food journey rightfully should, with the holy grail of Dutch sweets. The stroopwafel.
Oh, the stroopwafel. You know, I still dream about that perfect first bite, the caramel just warm and oozing out the sides.
Yes, nothing compares to that freshly made stroopwafel at a street market, layered over a cup of piping hot coffee.
Although, Lara, while the stroopwafel is the star, we cannot forget about poffertjes, those little fluffy pancakes that you just drench in butter and powdered sugar.
Dutch pancakes in all forms are really something special. Thin, with endless topping possibilities. My favorite might just be the classic apple and syrup. What's yours?
I'm a purist, simple lemon and sugar for me. But let's pivot to something more savory. I'm thinking of that perfect, crispy bite of bitterballen.
The ultimate Dutch pub snack. And there's so much more than just a simple meatball. That rich, meaty, molten center with a crunchy breadcrumb coating, it's the best accompaniment to a cold beer.
Speaking of beer, Dutch breweries are crafting some truly extraordinary flavors these days. From a classic Pilsner to more experimental microbrews, there's something for every palate.
I'm partial to the brown cafes myself. Age-old establishments where the beer flows as freely as the conversation.
And let's not forget the cheese. My taste buds are overwhelmed just thinking about the varieties: aged Gouda, Edamer, and let's not forget the goat cheeses.
A trip to the cheese markets like the ones in Alkmaar is a must. Mountains of cheese wheels as far as the eye can see.
Which brings us to something I cherish, the markets. Specifically, the Albert Kuip market. It's a sensory overload, with stalls bursting with spice, fresh fish, mountains of fruits and veggies, and of course, the famous Dutch herring.
Ah, Dutch herring, fresh, raw, and served with pickles and onions. It's a traditional treat that you either love or you don't, but you've got to try it at least once.
Now, Lara, if raw herring isn't your thing, Amsterdam's culinary landscape has another side: fusion. Places where Dutch cuisine meets worldly flavors.
True, Amsterdam is a melting pot after all. There are exquisite Indonesian restaurants thanks to historical ties, and let's not disregard the recent upswing of trendy spots offering a twist on classics.
And for our listeners who'd love to bring a slice of Amsterdam into their kitchens, I've got a simple recipe. How about starting with a Dutch apple pie? Easy to make, yet oh so satisfying.
I can almost smell the aroma of warm apples and cinnamon as we speak. And for those curious, Amsterdam apple pies have that distinctively thick crust, which I reckon makes all the difference.
So, whether it's the sweets like stroopwafels and puffertjes, the savories like the world-renowned cheeses and bitterballen, or the comforting Dutch apple pie, Amsterdam demonstrates its culinary prowess in every bite.
Right on, Luca. And with that flavorful note, let's prepare our listeners for a bit of discovery away from the bustling marketplaces and main squares. In our next segment, we're uncovering the hidden gems of Amsterdam, those tucked-away treasures that make this city truly one of a kind.
So, hidden gems, the little whispers of Amsterdam that don't scream for attention but evidently sing when discovered. Let's dig into those secret corners of the city, shall we?
Absolutely. And how appropriate that we start with something named after a lady. Electric Ladyland, no less.
Ah, the art of fluorescence, a museum where you step inside a glowing, abstract canvas, right?
Yes, that place takes the concept of hidden gems literally. I mean, the whole space is alight with works that are as much about perception as they are about art.
You're walking through this place, immersed in color that feels alive. That's an otherworldly experience.
Next is a place of tranquility amidst the bustling city, the Begijnhof. It always amazes me when I step inside, the noise of the city fades away.
It's like you're transported to a different time. These women, the Beguines, created a peaceful community right in the heart of Amsterdam, and you can still feel that sense of calm.
I've always been enchanted by the wooden house there, the oldest wooden house in Amsterdam.
Imagine the stories that house could tell. It's seen centuries of change.
Right? But now for a completely different kind of hidden gem, a floating feline sanctuary, the cat boat.
Oh, de Poisenboot. How much do I love thee? It's the only animal sanctuary on water I know of.
It's the perfect place for cat lovers, and the cats seem so content with their floating home. A hidden gem for a good cause.
Speaking of unexpected sanctuaries, let's not forget about Ons Lief hier op zolder, our Lord in the attic.
Yes, a 17th century canal house that hides a church in its attic, born in a time when Catholics couldn't worship in public. Such a poetic piece of Amsterdam's history.
I always find it so moving to think about the people who used to meet there, in secret, just to practice their faith.
From catboats to secret churches, we now turn to one of my personal favorites. Luca, do you have a hidden spot that you particularly adore?
Absolutely. There's this little courtyard that I stumbled upon one frosty morning, just off Spoestraat. It's not marked on any map, and it's surrounded by these charming old houses, each with vines climbing the walls. It's as if the city holds its breath there.
That sounds delightful. I feel like hidden courtyards are sprinkled like little secrets all over Amsterdam.
What about you, Lara? Is there a secret spot that feels personal to you?
Well, there is one. It's on the roof of the Nemo Science Museum. It's a public space with a brilliant view of the city, but so many people seem to miss it. It's a place to watch clouds sail over Amsterdam with the whole city bustling below you. I find it utterly peaceful.
I've taken my notebook up there. Nothing like a muse with a view to inspire.
With views and cats, churches, and courtyards, it really does show you how many layers there are to Amsterdam. Each secret nook seems to resonate with its own quietly humming history.
And each visit to these places can feel like you're discovering a new chapter in Amsterdam's story. There's an intimacy to these gems that you don't always get with the more grandiose sights.
Exactly. That's the joy of exploring. The delight when you find something unexpected or overlooked by the usual trails.
Now, our listeners might think we've covered all the tucked-away treasures, but Amsterdam is a gift that keeps on giving.
And on that note, prepare to have your mind twisted into delightful knots in our next segment as we reveal some weird facts about Amsterdam.
All right, welcome back, listeners. Segment 4 is all about Amsterdam's must-see places that you just can't miss. And trust me, there are a lot of them.
That's right, Luca. We're starting off with the heart of green space in Amsterdam, Vondelpark. It's not just a park, it's an institution, a haven in the city for both tourists and locals alike.
You've got it. And with the open-air theater, the Picasso statue, and those adorable parakeets, Vondelpark is perfect for an afternoon picnic or just a leisurely bike ride.
I remember watching a performance at that theater. There's something magical about live entertainment with the rustling of the trees as the backdrop.
Now, from greenery to history, let's talk Dam Square, the beating heart of Amsterdam, isn't it?
Absolutely. Home to the Royal Palace, Dam Square is the epitome of grandeur. But let's not forget the National Monument, where you can really feel the weight of Dutch history.
Speaking of history, you know it's a must to wander through the Jordaan. Once a working-class bastion,
Now the center of the trendiest cafes, boutiques, and art galleries. Oh, Luca, I could spend hours just people-watching from one of those quaint coffee shops.
and then whistle some tunes in front of the house where Rembrandt spent his final years. Now, if old churches are your thing, the Oude Kerk is a paradox.
That it is. The oldest building in Amsterdam, surrounded by the red light district's neon lights. The stories its ancient walls could tell.
Oh, and for thrill seekers, we must point them to the Dam Lookout. That swing over the edge is not for the faint of heart.
Luca, I still can't believe you got me on that swing. A swing 100 meters above the ground, nonetheless. But the view of Amsterdam up there, it's unparalleled.
It's like you have the city in the palm of your hand. Now, Lara, what's your must-see recommendation?
For me, it has to be the Botanical Gardens, Hortus Botanicus. In the middle of this urban sprawl, you'll find this lush oasis steeped in history with plants from all over the world.
And for me, listeners, it's the Stedelijk Museum. Even if you're not an art aficionado, the combination of the architecture with its bathtub modern wing and the contemporary art inside is intriguing.
Well, hasn't this been a lovely tour of must-sees? But Amsterdam isn't all about the history and scenery.
Oh no, it isn't. Because after a break, we'll be diving into Amsterdam's weird and wonderful facts. Who doesn't love some weird facts, right?
Spot on, Luca. From curious tidbits to strange laws, we'll have lots to share in the next segment. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the odd, the peculiar, the downright weird facts about Amsterdam, our beloved city of strangeness.
And we begin with the fact that Amsterdam floats on water. Well, almost. Did you know there are over 2,500 houseboats in the city? It's like Venice decided to have a quirky cousin.
Right, and some of these aren't just houses on water. They're pieces of art, botanical gardens, even a cat sanctuary. Imagine rocking to sleep every night, knowing a family of ducks might paddle by your window.
Oh, Luca, you'd make friends with every duck in the canal. But from floating homes to bridges, let's talk about the Skinny Bridge, or Magera Brug. Legend has it that it was built by two sisters who lived on opposite sides of the river and wanted an easier way to visit each other.
But they were on a budget, hence the bridge's narrowness. Mind you, that's a legend. It may just have been Dutch practicality in action.
Talking about Dutch practicality, did you know most of Amsterdam is below sea level?
Yes, some parts about 6 feet below to be precise. The Dutch are masters at managing water. They've been fighting back the sea for centuries and winning with a mix of canals, dikes, and sheer stubbornness.
Sheer stubbornness should be a national resource. Now onto something every visitor wonders about, gable stones. Houses here used to have these beautifully carved signs indicating the owner's profession or family emblem.
Yes, before literacy was widespread, these stones served as street numbers and business signs. A pair of scissors for a tailor, a loaf of bread for a baker, really an Instagrammable piece of history.
Hilarious laws are part of Amsterdam's history too. Here's a weird fact. It's illegal to keep unmarried women's company after dark. Not enforced, obviously, but an odd relic, right?
Absolutely. And then there's the one where you can't walk your dog without a leash. Understandable. But you're also not allowed to let it bark too much. Quieter dogs preferred here.
Let's not forget, in the past, it was illegal not to have written permission from your landlord if you wanted more than 3 people dancing in your house. Imagine needing a permit for a small party.
Our ancestors clearly didn't want us to have too much fun. That said, we know how to throw a fantastic party these days, permits or no.
They sure knew how to choose a location. Here's an incredible fact. Did you know about the Night Watch?
You mean Rembrandt's painting, right?
Not just that. There actually were night watchmen known as the Rattle Watch because they carried a wooden rattle to scare off thieves or to wake them up. I never quite understood which.
You'd think the rattles would just announce they were coming. Hello, thieves. I'll be at your location in approximately 5 rattles.
Precisely. But it's these little quirks that make our city's history so rich. Now from history, let's segue into something a bit more contemporary. Up next, we delve deep into how these little quirks from the past paved the way for Amsterdam's vibrant present with the segment History.
Here we are in the tapestry of time, tracing our fingers over the intricate threads that have woven the story of Amsterdam. From the humble beginnings to the mighty city it is now, history here has so many layers, doesn't it, Lara?
Absolutely, Luca. Every cobblestone and canal has a tale to tell. Starting out as a small fishing village around the Amstel River, it's incredible to think Amsterdam's history dates back to the 12th century.
And it wasn't until the 13th century that they actually built the dam on the Amstel that gave Amsterdam its name. I love that simple practicality turned into such a historic moment for the city.
It eloquently sets the stage for the Dutch Golden Age, doesn't it? That was the 17th century, right, Luca? When Amsterdam became one of the world's most important ports?
Exactly. That was the era of expansion, both in terms of trade and culture. The Dutch East India Company led exploration and trade missions that spanned the globe. The wealth that poured into Amsterdam is still reflected in the grandeur of the buildings from that era.
And it wasn't just trade that flourished. The Golden Age was a renaissance for the arts and science. Think about Rembrandt, Vermeer, and the philosopher Spinoza, all walking these streets and calling this city home.
That's right. The city became a center for not only economic power, but creativity and innovation. This period also saw the construction of Amsterdam's iconic canal belt, which I still find stunning every time I stroll beside it.
Moving through the centuries, the city has seen its share of challenges, hasn't it? Such as the Great Plague in the 17th century and later the Napoleonic Wars and the economic downturns that followed.
Nevertheless, Amsterdam always had a knack for bouncing back, stronger and more vibrant. But no period challenged the city's spirit quite like the 20th century, and specifically, the Second World War.
The occupation of the Netherlands by Nazi Germany brought dark times to Amsterdam. The city's Jewish community suffered devastating losses, including the tragic story of Anne Frank and her family.
It's a testament to the resilience and fortitude of the Amsterdam people that the city recovered from such profound adversity. Liberation Day, on the 5th of May, is still celebrated every year to remember the end of the occupation and to value freedom.
Post-war Amsterdam found new ways to thrive. The second half of the 20th century brought cultural shifts, with the city becoming a beacon of progressiveness and counterculture in the 60s, right, Luca?
That's the Amsterdam spirit for you, Lara. Always at the forefront of social change. In the 60s and 70s, the city established itself as the capital of tolerance, with its welcoming approach to all walks of life, earning the affectionate nickname Mokum by its people.
This open-mindedness isn't new, though. It's a continuation of a long history of religious tolerance, dating back to the 16th century when Jewish refugees were welcomed from Portugal and Spain.
And today, that same tolerance is reflected in the over 180 nationalities living in Amsterdam. It's a modern, cosmopolitan city that has managed to maintain its proud history while embracing the future.
You've got it. Amsterdam's ever-evolving story is what makes it such a stimulating place. And that spirit of constant growth and inclusivity is what makes the city not just a historical gem, but a contemporary one too.
Absolutely, Lara. Walking through Amsterdam, one feels a strong connection to the past, but also a rush of excitement for the future.
Speaking of excitement, next up in our Travel with Lara and Luca adventure, we have the segment that everyone needs before setting off on their own exploration. Expert travel tips. We're going to share more than just your usual advice. Brace yourself for those secret nuggets of gold that only seasoned travelers know.
That's the scoop I'm ready to dig into. Knowing how to make your way around a city as dense and vibrant as Amsterdam can make all the difference. So don't drift away, because we've got the real insider info coming up next. So, Lara, we've waxed lyrical about the must-sees and the hidden nooks, but let's offer the practical wisdom our listeners are craving. It's time for our expert travel tips for navigating the wonder that is Amsterdam.
You're right, Luca. Now, I always say the best way to get a true feel for a city is on two wheels. Biking through Amsterdam is not just a mode of transport, it's a way of life.
Absolutely, Lara, but beware the unspoken bike lane rules, folks. The Amsterdammers take their cycling very seriously. If you don't want to hear the infamous fietsbel or bike bell, stick to the right and always signal when turning.
Signal while turning, and look out for trams. Never underestimate them, they're always closer than you think. But if biking isn't your style, the tram system is excellent.
Oh, it is, but do remember to check out. I've had a few friends pay extra because they forgot to tap their cards on those little readers as they disembarked.
Now, on avoiding tourist traps, there is one big rule.
Indeed, and it's this. If there's a person outside inviting you in, it's likely not where the locals eat. To find the best spots, turn down a side street and pick a place full of Dutch speakers.
And if you're visiting museums, which you should be, don't get the tickets on the spot.
Spot on, Lara. Buy museum tickets online ahead of time to skip the lines, and definitely consider a museum card if you'll be visiting more than 3.
Now, Luca, I know we've experienced all kinds of weather in Amsterdam. When is your favorite time to visit?
May or September for me. You avoid the summer crowd, but the weather is still inviting. That sweet spot where you might just get a canal-side terrace all to yourself.
Oh, that's perfect terrace weather. But let's not forget King's Day in April. The whole city turns into an orange sea of festivities. It is the Dutch party you cannot miss.
King's Day. Be ready to be overwhelmed in the best possible way. And on that note, learning a bit of Dutch goes a long way with the locals. Even just mastering dankjewel for thank you is appreciated.
It's those little efforts, right? Even saying hello instead of hello puts a smile on faces.
Certainly does. And on safety, just be vigilant. Pickpockets can spot tourists a mile off.
But don't let that scare you, folks. It's about staying aware. Keep your belongings secure and don't flash around expensive devices.
As exciting as Amsterdam's nightlife may be, stay sharp. Maybe splurge on a taxi if it's late and you're not sure about the route back to your hotel.
Speaking of splurging, we've got some cost-saving tips too. Dining out for lunch can be cheaper than dinner, and the portions are just as generous.
And for something special, look for an early bird or happy hour special. Some of the finest dining spots have great deals if you eat a bit earlier.
Don't sleep on the city passes either. These can bundle public transport, museums, and attractions at a fraction of the cost.
I'm a big fan of those. Another great tip is renting an apartment or staying at a B&B to save on accommodations.
And you get a more authentic living in Amsterdam experience, maybe even with bicycle included.
I do love that. But no matter how you choose to experience Amsterdam, our last and possibly most essential tip is to walk. Walk as much as you can.
Oh yes, every corner of Amsterdam has a story. You'll miss them if you don't take the time to slow down and see the city on foot.
So true, Lara. And while walking, why not think about a little day trip to the Dutch countryside? But let's keep the details of that for our next segment.
A tantalizing teaser indeed, Luca. Our next segment on Side Excursions is Any Traveler's Guide to the Perfect Out-of-Town Jaunts.
Well, folks, we've covered so much of Amsterdam itself, but how about when you feel like stepping outside the city for a day? That's what we're diving into now. Side excursions from Amsterdam. Places you can easily venture to and be back in time for your canal side dinner.
Absolutely, Luca. One of my all-time favorite day trips has to be to Zaanse. It's like stepping into a postcard from the past with those iconic windmills.
Ah, the windmills. Yes, and you can actually go inside some of them, can't you? They're not just there for decoration.
Right you are. They're fully functioning, and some make mustard, others saw wood. It's a glimpse into the Dutch Industrial Revolution that you won't get anywhere else.
Speaking of glimpses into the past, there's the Keukenhof Gardens. But remember, folks, it's only open for 8 weeks each spring.
The tulip displays, they're out of this world. The colors, the arrangements, like Mother Nature's own fashion show.
You know, I heard someone call Keukenhof the Garden of Europe. And honestly, I can't think of a more fitting title.
From flowers to the seaside, there's always Zandvoort Beach. I adore the serenity of the sea, and that's just a short train ride away.
A bit of sunbathing, a touch of surfing, maybe even a stroll along the beach, if the Dutch weather allows, of course.
And for listeners who enjoy a historic vibe, there's Haarlem, with its medieval architecture and bustling market square.
Don't forget, Haarlem is also famous for its beer. It's a hub for microbreweries, so it's a must for beer lovers.
Speaking of quaint places, the charm of Edam is just indescribable. It's not just cheese, although who doesn't love cheese?
You'd be surprised how peaceful it feels, wandering through the little streets and canals there. It's a side of the Netherlands you won't see in the bigger cities.
Then there's Volendam, with the harbor, fish markets, and those classic Dutch wooden shoes. I think visitors love getting their photos in traditional costumes there.
For sure, it's a tourist favorite. But if you're looking for something quieter, something for the art enthusiasts, you could go to the artist colonies in Bergen or Laren.
Bergen is inspiring. It's surrounded by dunes and forests, and you can totally grasp why artists were drawn to that place.
And Laren still has that artistic spirit with its galleries. Plus, a visit to the Singer Laren Museum is always a treat.
Last but not least, the great outdoors. For city dwellers, it's a breath of fresh air to go on nature treks or bike around in the true Dutch fashion.
Get away from the rush of the city and pedal through the Dutch countryside. The route from Amsterdam to Muiden and then on to Naarden is one of my favorites.
Such a scenic ride with Muiden Castle along the way. And Naarden itself, with its star-shaped fortress seen from above, is quite special.
Makes you realize that Amsterdam is just the starting point. The whole country is filled with gems just a short trip away.
True, and these side excursions we've mentioned, they're just a few options among many. There's still so much more to explore outside the city, and each place tells another piece of the Dutch story.
And we wouldn't want it any other way. With every little trip, our love for the Netherlands grows a bit more.
It's not just about ticking sites off a list. It's about the experiences, the stories, the miniature adventures within your larger Dutch journey.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Lara. Speaking of journeys, are we ready for our listeners' next adventure on this podcast?
I think we are, Luca. Next up, we're wrapping up our enchanting Amsterdam episode with final thoughts, a bit of recap, and you'll definitely want to stick around for a special listener challenge.
Plus, we'll give you a tiny peek at the theme of our next episode. So stay tuned. We'll be right back to paint a final stroke on our Amsterdam canvas. And just like the final stroke on a Rembrandt masterpiece, we're bringing our Amsterdam adventure to a close.
It's been a whirlwind tour through the winding canals past the glinting bike spokes and deep into the heart of this vibrant city.
We've shared iconic sites like the Rijksmuseum, where centuries of history are framed on every wall.
And we talked about our love for Dutch cuisine. Those little poffertjes may be small, but they leave a big impression.
Not to mention the hidden places like Electric Ladyland, that fluorescent wonderland that colors your perspective in new hues.
We were like two kids in a candy shop when we discussed must-see places. Remember how we got into that friendly debate about whether the Vondelpark outranked the Edam Lookout swing?
Oh, I stand by my choice. Nothing beats the ground under your feet in a lush sea of green.
We sure unearthed some weird facts, too. I can't believe we found many quirky bits of trivia, like Amsterdam being a pioneer in catboat sanctuaries.
And our history segment, walking through time from the city's humble beginnings to its present dynamic spirit.
I feel like our listeners are ready to be Amsterdam experts themselves, especially after all the travel tips we laid out.
Could you imagine them zipping through the streets on their bikes, saying dag to everyone with all the confidence of a local?
That image brings me joy. This city has something for everyone. It's a tapestry of culture, history, and fun.
Speaking of joy, what was your happiest moment today, Lara? The one where you felt most connected to Amsterdam?
For me, it's when we talked about the sense of freedom you find in this city. It's palpable, right from the cozy streets of Jordaan to the open-mindedness that permeates the culture.
Absolutely. For me, it's the enveloping aroma of fresh stroopwafels in the morning, blending with the gentle hum of the city waking up. Just beautiful.
As we wrap up, we want to throw a little challenge out there to you, our global family of wanderers. We'd love if you could share your stories of Amsterdam. Maybe we mentioned your favorite spot, or perhaps you discovered something new in our chat.
Yes, or if you've yet to visit, tell us what's on top of your list when you get to explore this eclectic city. We're always here for tips, thoughts, and to cheer on your adventures.
We're so grateful for the time you spent with us today. Diving deep into Amsterdam has been such a thrill. Luca, any parting words before we sign off?
Listeners, wherever you find yourself, whether it's cycling through an alley in Amsterdam or dreaming up your next trip from your living room, remember, there's beauty and wonder around every corner.
And keep those travelers' eyes open. Sometimes the most unforgettable experiences come from the places you least expect.
As for our next journey together, let's just say we'll be exchanging the serene canals for some vibrant festivals and timeless traditions.
Oh, that's going to be fantastic. But for now, it's tot ziens from Amsterdam. Until we meet again, keep traveling.
And keep sharing those stories. They're the diaries of our lives, and boy, do they have some great tales to tell.
Until next time, take care and happy travels.
Goodbye, everyone.